I remember the day I first saw him. A little boy sitting off to the side, back against a brick wall, picking at the ground with a stick. The other kids were running around the cracked concrete yard like they'd been shot out of a cannon. But he just sat there, shoulders rounded, eyes pointed down like he was apologizing to the dirt. The teacher at the orphanage leaned toward me and said quietly, "He's from a dysfunctional family. Problems usually happen with people like that. And besides, he's already 9 years old." The way she said "people like that" made my skin crawl, like she was talking about spoiled fruit. At that moment, her words struck me as terrifying. She treated children without parents like merchandise. I started arguing with her right there in that over-polished hallway that smelled like bleach and boiled vegetables. But no matter how hard she tried to explain it, I still took that boy into my family. It was difficult at first, sure. The nightmares, the hoarding food, the flinching whenever anyone raised their voice. But over time, the difficulties softened around the edges. We became a real family, the kind my husband and I always wanted. It's good that he didn't live to see how it all turned out. It's good he can't see what our son became. Because one afternoon, 2 orderlies grabbed me by both arms and dragged me to a van like I was some violent stranger off the street. My arms hurt, but my heart hurt more. That sullen little boy, my son, whom I love more than my own life, stood on the porch watching them load me in. He'd forged papers saying I was insane and had me committed to a mental hospital. All for the sake of an inheritance I refused to sign over early because I wanted him to learn how to earn his own way. As they were putting me into the van and my son was handing the orderly my things in a neat little plastic bag, he leaned down so only I could hear him. "You're not my mother anyway," he said, "and you don't have much time left. Just be patient." His voice was so cold, it didn't even sound angry. Just done. I don't remember the first week after arriving at the mental hospital. It's a blur of needles and locked doors. When the sedatives finally wore off and they stopped calling me a threat to myself and others, I decided I would do anything to get out of there. Anything legal, that is. And I meant it. My name is Linda. I'm 60 now. I live in a small ranch house on the edge of Dayton, Ohio. Beige siding, maple tree out front, mortgage paid off after 30 years of packing lunches and clipping coupons. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I was married once, to a good man, which is rarer than people admit. His name was Mark. Factory guy, worked his way up to supervisor. He had big, calloused hands and the softest way of speaking when he was tired. We couldn't have kids. I had a string of miscarriages that wore my body and heart out. So for a long time, it was just the 2 of us and our dog, Daisy. When I was 41 and Mark was 45, we started the adoption process. We wanted an older kid, a kid who actually needed a home, not a baby that 3 dozen couples were already waiting in line for. That's how we ended up at that orphanage. That's how we ended up in that concrete yard where a skinny 9-year-old boy sat picking at the ground like he was trying to dig his way out of his own life. His name was Tyler. He didn't talk much at first. Wanted everything labeled. Kept his backpack on for the first 2 months he lived with us, like someone might show up any minute to tell him it was all a mistake and he had to leave. The caseworker told us his parents were dead. Both overdosed, she said, like she was giving us a weather report. Dysfunctional, long history with Child Protective Services. I remember tightening my jaw and thinking, he deserves better than to be defined by that. For the first couple years, we were all learning each other. The tantrums were bad. He'd scream if we changed plans last minute. He hoarded food under his bed. He'd shut down if anyone criticized him. But we did family therapy. I went to every school meeting. I sat on the edge of his bed during his nightmares and rubbed his back until he fell asleep again. Mark taught him how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to check the oil in a car. Typical dad stuff. I still remember the way Tyler used to look at him, like he'd hung the moon. Then Mark's heart attack came out of nowhere when Tyler was 15. One minute we were arguing over what show to watch. The next minute Mark was on the floor clutching his chest. He was gone before the paramedics could even get the stretcher into the house. Tyler punched a hole through the hallway drywall that night and just sobbed. I didn't even yell. I sat down on the floor next to him and we cried together, our shoulders bumping like we were two little kids instead of a 45-year-old widow and a teenage boy who'd lost two fathers. Something changed in him after that. He got quieter at first, then sharper. Sarcasm turned into cruelty. Matching socks turned into, "Why do you care? Who's going to see him?" Homework turned into, "What's the point? I'll just end up like my real parents anyway." That line always made my stomach twist. We got through high school by the skin of our teeth. I'm not going to pretend I was some perfect saint of a mother. I nagged. I worried. I said the wrong thing a lot. But I always made sure he had food, clothes, a roof, and someone to sign the permission slips. He barely graduated, but he did. College wasn't his thing, but he bounced around jobs. Warehouse, auto parts store, some shady marketing team that was just door-to-door sales. By the time he was 27, things had calmed down enough that I had started to believe we were okay. Not perfect, but stable. We had holidays, barbecues. He'd come over and fix my leaky sink and raid my fridge like any other grown kid. I had my little bookkeeping business from home, and the money Mark left me in life insurance, plus the house, put me in a decent spot. Not rich, just safe. And that, apparently, was the problem. Because as Tyler got older, he started asking questions. It started small. "Hey, Mom, you ever think about downsizing? You don't really need all this space, do you?" I'd be standing at the sink, washing dishes, and he'd say casually, "What's even the point of you paying property taxes when you could just sell this place, get a condo, and have a ton of cash left over?" The first time he said it, I laughed. "Oh, so that's your plan? Kick the old lady into a one-bedroom so you can get your hands on my house?" He smirked, but there was something hungry in it. I mean, we could both benefit. He started making comments about my will. "Who's getting the house when you die? Do you have a retirement plan? How much did Dad leave you?" I answered what I thought was reasonable. We had always been open about money in theory, but I'm old school. I still believe there are some things a person is entitled to keep private, even from their child. "Tyler," I said one night over dinner, "you will be taken care of when I die. There is a will. You don't need to worry." "That's easy for you to say," he snapped. "You're not the one who grew up wondering if there's going to be food." I swallowed my irritation. "You haven't wondered that for 19 years. But the fear was real in his eyes. Old fear. I recognized it. Trauma is sticky. I get that. So I tried to be patient. Then he brought me papers. "Hey, can you just sign this?" he said one Saturday, flopping a stack of forms on my kitchen table between the coffee maker and the basket of mail. "It's just in case of emergency stuff, so I can help you if something happens." I picked them up. "Durable power of attorney," I read slowly. "Medical power of attorney, financial..." Why are these all filled out already? He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "It's just what my friend said his mom did, for aging parents. I found the forms online." There was a time I might have just signed, trusting him. But I'm a bookkeeper. Paperwork is my language. "These need to go through a lawyer," I said. "I'm not signing anything without one." His jaw tightened. "You don't trust me?" "I do," I lied. "But I also trust that I can get taken advantage of. That's why lawyers exist." He let it go. Or pretended to. The next few months, things went weird. My neighbor, Carolyn, mentioned that Tyler had asked her,
casually, if I'd been confused lately. Like, forgetting where you are or saying strange things, he'd asked. Carolyn said she'd laughed it off. She told him, "You have a better memory than me," she said, but I thought it was odd. At my doctor's appointment, my primary care physician asked if I'd noticed any cognitive decline. "Your son called," she said, "just said he was worried. Asked if we'd done any screening." I was furious and embarrassed all at once. At Thanksgiving, Tyler asked me 3 times if I'd taken my blood pressure medication, loudly, in front of everyone. I don't even take blood pressure medication. "You're forgetful, Mom," he said when I snapped at him. "I'm just trying to help." I started double-checking everything. Stove off, doors locked, bills paid. I had a little notebook where I wrote down what I did every day just to prove to myself I wasn't losing it. Then I started noticing things disappearing. It wasn't big stuff at first. My late husband's watch went missing from my dresser. A small box of silver spoons from my grandmother's hutch vanished from the dining room hutch. An envelope of cash, $500 for an upcoming roof repair that I'd tucked behind a cookbook, gone. I turned the house upside down. Nothing.
I wanted to accuse Tyler, but how do you look your child in the face and say, "Are you stealing from me?" So I asked indirectly, "Ty, did you see Mark's watch when you were looking for batteries the other day?" "No," he said easily. Too easily. "Why? Did you lose it?" "Misplaced, maybe," I said. "Same with Nana's spoons." He shrugged. "You do say you're getting forgetful." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said it. Light, teasing, but his eyes were flat. That was the first time a tiny, sharp thought slipped through my mind. He's setting you up. Then I shoved it away. Because what kind of mother thinks that? Apparently a mother who's about to get dragged into a psych ward with forged paperwork. The actual day it happened was painfully ordinary at first. I'd just come back from the grocery store. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I always got the senior discount on Tuesdays. Small joys. I was putting away cans of soup when there was a loud knock on the door. 2 men stood on my porch, both in scrubs, light blue, with ID badges clipped to their chests. There was a white van on the street with some generic behavioral health transport logo on the side. "Mrs. Harris?" one of them asked. "Yes." "I'm Greg, this is Devin. We're here to escort you to your appointment." "My appointment." "I don't have an appointment," I said. "You must have the wrong—" The taller one held up a clipboard. "My name, my address, date of birth. We have an order here signed by your psychiatrist and your son, your legal health proxy. Involuntary evaluation for concerns of self-neglect and mental deterioration." It felt like all the air got sucked out of the hallway. "I don't have a psychiatrist," I said. Behind them, I saw Tyler's car pull up. He got out slowly, like he'd planned his entrance. "What's going on?" I asked him, my voice shaking. "Mom," he said in that patronizing tone I hate, "we've talked about this. You've been confused. You forgot the oven twice last week. You called me at 2 a.m. and didn't remember." "That never happened," I cut in. "What is this?" "We just want to make sure you're safe." He gave the men a little nod. "She gets agitated sometimes. Try to be gentle." "Tyler, you don't dare!" I snapped. "You know this isn't—" They moved faster than I expected. One pinned my arms behind my back in some practiced move. The other explained, in a calm, rehearsed voice, that resisting would only make things harder. "I'm calling the police!" I shouted. "We already spoke to them. They said as long as you're with professionals, it's fine." The neighbors came out to stare as they half-dragged me to the van. "Tyler!" I yelled. "Look at me!" He did, just for a second. His eyes were hard. "You're not my mother anyway. And you don't have much time left. Just be patient." They closed the van doors on my scream.
If you've never been to a psychiatric hospital as a patient, let me tell you, it's not like the movies, and it's not like the brochure. First, there's intake. They take your purse, your phone, your shoes with laces, and then they ask you a list of questions so long and clinical, you start to feel crazy just by answering them. Do you ever hear voices? Have you ever thought of harming yourself? Do you know where you are? I said, I'm in a facility where I don't belong because my son is trying to steal my life. The nurse just nodded sympathetically and checked off a box. They put a rubber band around my wrist with my name and a barcode. Then they gave me 2 little cups of pills. Just to help you calm down, they said. I refused at first. Then 2 security guards came in. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, one said mechanically. I took the pills. The next week is a haze. I remember slices. A woman screaming all night in the next room. The squeak of nurses' shoes in the hallway. The constant smell of disinfectant and institutional food. My own thoughts slowing down like someone had poured syrup into my brain. When the fog finally lifted, I was sitting in a common room, staring at a muted TV, sunlight bouncing off the safety glass windows. A nurse named Maria sat down next to me. She had kind eyes and tired shoulders. Mrs. Harris, she said softly, you've been here 8 days. 8 days. My mortgage payment was due. My electric bill. My clients were probably wondering where their bookkeeping reports were. I need to call my lawyer, I said, my voice coming out rough. She hesitated. You're on an involuntary hold. 72 hours to start, but the doctor extended it based on your son's report and the initial evaluation. What evaluation? I asked. I was sedated the entire time. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. You did meet with Dr. Mandel. He's the attending psychiatrist. You were very upset. Because I was kidnapped, I snapped. She glanced around, then leaned in closer. Look, off the record, I've seen this before. Not the kidnapping part, but family members using the system when there's money or control involved. It's ugly. Then why am I still here? I asked. Because on paper, she said, you're a confused elderly woman with a son who cares enough to get you evaluated and a doctor saying you're a danger to yourself. Without evidence to the contrary, the system believes them. I took a breath. What would count as evidence to the contrary? Coherence, she said. Stability. No outbursts. No refusal of meds. You have to play the game. I looked at her. I didn't realize I was in a game. She gave me a tired half smile. You're in one whether you want to be or not. That was the moment the anger crystallized into something sharp and cold. Enough feeling hurt. Enough feeling betrayed. Enough trying to convince everyone with my words. Tyler had used paperwork, signatures, systems. Fine. I've spent my whole life reading the fine print. I was going to use the system right back. Step 1, get out. Not by dramatic escape over the fence, not by pretending to be someone else, but by doing exactly what Maria said. I took the stupid pills. Not the heavy ones. They couldn't force those down my throat once I started cheeking them, but enough that I complied. I answered questions calmly, I didn't raise my voice. I asked for a neuropsych evaluation just to check my memory so my son can feel better. I framed everything as concern for Tyler. That's a strategy you learn as a woman. Make your own needs sound like they're for someone else's sake, and suddenly doors open. I made friends with the social worker, Hannah. She was young, idealistic, still thought forms could fix people's lives. Can I see the paperwork my son submitted? I asked her one afternoon in her cramped little office, where there were inspirational posters curling off the walls. I'm not sure, she started. It's my record, I said. HIPAA says I have a right to my own medical information. Her eyebrows went up. You know HIPAA? I ran my own business for 30 years. I read contracts for fun. Please. She sighed and turned to her computer. What I saw made my hands shake. There it was. History of progressive cognitive decline, paranoid ideation, forgetfulness leading to dangerous behavior. And there was my psychiatrist's signature. A doctor I'd never met until I was half sedated who'd based his whole evaluation on Tyler's story and 30 minutes with a drugged woman in a paper gown. On top was a copy of a document I had never seen before: medical power of attorney and guardianship, notarized, naming Tyler as my decision maker. My signature was at the bottom. Neat, clean, forged. I'm not a handwriting expert, but I know my own hand. Mine has a slight tremor in the L from a wrist injury in my 30s. This one was smooth. And the H in Harris? Wrong style entirely. Hannah, I said, fighting to keep my voice level, I did not sign this. Oh, Mrs. Harris, sometimes people don't remember. I snapped my head up so fast she stopped mid-sentence. I did not sign this. I want a copy. She hesitated. HIPAA, I said again quietly. Please. She printed me one. I folded it and tucked it into the spine of my Bible. They'd taken away my phone, but they let me have my Bible. Apparently faith is fine, but proof is dangerous. Step 2, prove I wasn't losing my mind. The neuropsych evaluation took 4 hours. A sweet older man named Dr. Chiang had me repeat lists of words, draw clocks, do little puzzles, answer questions. When we finished, he took off his glasses and said, Mrs. Harris, your memory is better than mine. Can you put that in writing? I asked. He chuckled. Yes, that's literally my job. I requested copies of everything. I didn't have much control, but I could build a paper trail. Step 3, reach someone on the outside. I couldn't call Tyler, didn't want to anyway, but I had one person who might actually listen. My sister-in-law, Mark's younger sister, Denise. She lived an hour away and works nights as a nurse. We weren't best friends, but we'd stayed in touch. Visiting hours went and went with no sign of her. Tyler showed up once just to smirk through the safety glass and tell me how relieved he was that I was getting help. You forged my signature, he smiled. They said you might say things like that. I almost lunged at the glass.
Instead, I stared at him and said, You are not going to get away with this. He leaned back, stretching his arms over the back of his chair. You sure about that? You sound unstable, Mom. He spat that last word like it tasted bad. When he left, I asked Hannah to add a note to my file. Patient requests that sister-in-law Denise Rivera be added as emergency contact and allowed visitation. Tyler is listed as your only emergency contact currently, she said. Well, he shouldn't be, I replied, and since you all seem so concerned about my support system, you'd better expand it. Sometimes throwing their buzzwords back at them works, she agreed. A week later, Denise showed up. What the hell is going on? She hissed as soon as we sat down in the little visitor's room with the bolted-down chairs. I slid the copied documents across the table. Read. She did. Her face went from confused to horrified to furious in about 30 seconds. He forged your signature? She said. Tell me something I don't know. Why would he? Money, I said simply. Control. Same reason most people do terrible things. She looked up at me, eyes wet. What do you want me to do? Here's where being 60 is an advantage. I've had a lot of time to watch how systems work. I knew I couldn't just scream fraud and expect everyone to fall over themselves fixing it. First, I said, I need a lawyer, a real one, not some ambulance chaser from the TV, someone who knows elder law and mental health. She nodded, already pulling out her phone. Okay, and second? Second, I said slowly, I need you to get me copies of Tyler's birth records, adoption papers, anything you can find about his biological parents, the stuff the agency never told us. She frowned. Why? Because Tyler thinks he's better than where he came from. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. But there are patterns in his blood he doesn't even know about. And if I'm going to stop him, I need to hold up a mirror so brutal he can't look away from what he's doing. Linda, she said gently, are you sure that's wise? No, but nothing about this is wise. It's survival. She took my hand. Okay, I'm in. Step 4, get discharged. With an attorney on the outside filing motions and Dr. Chiang's report stating I was cognitively intact, the 72-hour hold extension became harder to justify. Dr. Mandel tried. She is still expressing delusional beliefs about her son forging documents, paranoia focused on family. My attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Brooks, shredded that. In the hearing room, just a bland conference room with a speakerphone, she said, "Your Honor, my client's so-called delusion is supported by objective evidence." Then she faxed over enlarged copies of my signature next to real ones from my driver's license and business records. Even a judge on a bad day can see the difference. After 2.5 weeks locked up, I was released. Not because anyone apologized, not because anyone admitted they were wrong, but because the liability of keeping a clearly competent woman locked in a psychiatric facility with a forged guardianship was bigger than the liability of letting me go. That was good enough for me, because getting out was just the beginning. Denise picked me up at the hospital. The first breath of fresh outside air hit me so hard, I had to lean against her car for a second just to steady myself. "I have something for you," she said once we were on the highway. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, fat with papers. "What's this?" Everything I could find on Tyler, his original birth certificate, the orphanage records they didn't give you, county reports, and, she hesitated, the coroner's report on his parents, and their death certificates. My hands trembled as I took the folder. From the passenger seat of a 2011 Honda, I saw more of my son's origin story than I'd ever been allowed to before. His original birth name wasn't even Tyler, it was Caleb. His last name was different, his mother had been in and out of rehab, his father had 3 arrests for possession and 1 for assault. The report on the night they died was brutal in its simplicity. Both found deceased in a motel room, apparent overdose, drug paraphernalia at the scene. Time of death, same approximate window. He'd been 7, 2 years before I met him. I inhaled slowly. He told me they died in a car accident. Denise glanced at me. Maybe that's what the caseworkers told him. Maybe, I said.
Or maybe it was easier to say car accident than overdose in a motel. At home, my house felt violated. There were new little things scattered around, Tyler's brand of coffee, his jacket on the back of the chair. He'd clearly been staying there while I was locked up. I went to my bedroom. My jewelry box was rifled through. My safe, small, fireproof, tucked in the closet, had a fresh pry mark on the side, like someone had tried to open it and failed. Idiot. It was bolted to the floor and had a backup code. Inside that safe was my trust document, the one that said Tyler wouldn't get full inheritance until he was 40, with checks at 30 and 35, if he met certain conditions. Employment, no felonies, basic grown-up stuff. He didn't know about those conditions. I'd figured telling him would just make him obsess. Now I was glad I hadn't. He thought getting control of me meant getting control of all of it. He didn't realize there was a legal firewall between my money and his access. Not yet. I spent the next few weeks doing what I do best: organizing. If you've never seen an angry 60-year-old woman with a filing system, trust me, it's a force of nature. I made binders, one for everything related to the forged documents, my real signature samples, the fake guardianship, the hospital evaluations, the judge's ruling releasing me, one for financials, bank statements, photocopies of the missing checks that Tyler had forged my name on, because yes, I found those too. Notes of every time something disappeared. Receipts for the gifts I'd given him, so those were clearly separated from what he'd taken. One for Tyler's past, his adoption file, his parents' records, death certificates, coroner's report, old case notes from child services. I even printed out problem sections and highlighted them in neon yellow. I may be old, but I know how to build a story with evidence. Then I did something that might sound petty, but was important. I went to the cemetery where his biological parents were buried. Their graves were in the indigent section. Simple markers with names and dates, nothing more. No flowers, no signs anyone had visited in years. I stood over those 2 little rectangles of grass and felt an odd mix of anger and pity. "You failed him," I said softly. "But I'm not going to." Then I took pictures, close-ups of the names, The dates. The fact that the time of death on the markers matched the overdoses in the report. I wasn't trying to shame him for where he came from. I wanted to show him exactly what path he was walking. Stealing, lying, using people, destroying the only solid ground he had. He thought he was being clever. He was just reenacting a tragedy. And I was done being the bystander. I didn't lure him. I invited him. Texted him from my own phone, which felt like an act of rebellion in itself. Dinner at my place Sunday at 6. Need to talk about next steps. We have a lot to sort out. There was a pause. Then, so you're out. That was fast. The judge disagreed with you and your doctor. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. He showed up at 6:15, like always. Controlling people love being slightly late, just enough to make you feel your lower priority. He walked in like he owned the place, dropping his keys on my counter. "So, how's my favorite patient?" he asked, mock cheerful. "I'm not your anything," I said. "Sit." He smirked, but sat at the kitchen table. Same place he used to sit doing homework, scowling over fractions. I set a cup of coffee in front of him. Black, the way he likes it. On the table between us were the 3 binders and the manila folder, stacked neatly. He eyed them. "What's all this?" "Your life. Past, present, and future." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, we're doing metaphors now. Mom, I don't have time to—" "Stop calling me Mom," I said quietly. "You made it very clear that's not how you see me. From now on, you can call me Linda." He blinked. Just once. That hit something. "Okay, Linda, why am I here? You ready to apologize for causing a scene at the hospital? They told me you were difficult." I smiled. It felt strange on my face. "I'm sure they did." I opened the first binder and slid a sheet toward him. It was the guardianship document with his forged signature of mine, side by side with my driver's license signature. "What do you see?" I asked. He barely glanced at it.
Paperwork. You know I don't do— Look, I snapped. He looked. His eyes flecked between the 2 signatures. "Okay," he said, feigning boredom. "Those are not the same," I said. "The judge agreed. The forensic document examiner agreed. You forged my name." He shrugged. "You probably messed it up when you signed. You told me you're shaky sometimes." "You really want to go with that?" I asked, "because I have 8 other samples from different years, all same style." I flipped the page to show them. And then there's this one, perfectly smooth, like it was written by a 30-year-old man with no wrist injury. His jaw tightened. He stayed silent. "It's a crime," I said, calm now. "You know that, right? Forging a legal document for gain? Criminal fraud. Elder abuse too, given my age. You checked that little box, concern for her finances, remember?" He swallowed. "You wouldn't— turn you in?" I finished. "I already have, Tyler." His head snapped up. "My lawyer filed the report with the DA last week. They're still investigating, but trust me, they're very interested, especially in the part where a child gets his aging mother locked in a psychiatric facility with a forged guardianship." "You're lying," he said. His voice cracked just a little. I pulled out a printed email. "Assistant District Attorney. See the letterhead?" He snatched it and read. His face went pale. "They're going to ask you some questions soon," I said, "about your motives, about the missing cash, about the checks you signed in my name." He slapped the paper down. "I was just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I demanded. "From my own house, my own bank account, from living my own life?" "You're old," he burst out. "You don't see how vulnerable you are. People take advantage." "Like you did?" I asked softly. He recoiled like I'd slapped him. Silence fell. The clock kitchen ticked. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. I opened the second binder. Financials.
Photocopies of checks I hadn't written. Withdrawals from ATMs I'd never used. Purchases from stores near his apartment. "You stole from me," I said. "You didn't ask. You didn't borrow. You took. And when you worried I might start noticing, you built a whole narrative about me losing my mind." He stared at the pages, his eyes darting like he could will the ink to rearrange itself. "I grew up with nothing," he muttered finally. "You don't get that." I took a breath. "You grew up with nothing for 9 years. Then you had a family, a roof, health insurance, vacations, game consoles, a dad who coached your baseball team, a mom who showed up to every meeting. Not my real parents. And whose fault is that?" I shot back louder than I meant. "Mine? Or the 2 people who let drugs matter more than you?" He flinched. There it was, the sore, festering wound no one had ever touched. I let the silence stretch for a moment, then opened the manila folder and pulled out the death certificates. I laid them gently on the table in front of him. "Do you know what these are?" I asked. He stared at them. His eyes skimmed the names, the dates, the words, "Cause of death, acute opioid overdose." His face went blank. Too blank. "No," he said. "My parents died in a car accident. That's what they told me." "They lied," I said softly. "Or they simplified. For a 7-year-old, maybe that was kinder. But you're not 7 anymore." He shook his head. "I don't want to see this." "You need to," I insisted. "Because you are repeating them, Tyler. Maybe not with needles and motel rooms, but you're self-destructing just the same. They used substances. You use people. They checked out of their responsibilities. You locked yours in a hospital so you could raid her life." His hands curled into fists on the table. "Stop," he whispered. "No," I said. "I won't stop. Not this time. I spent 19 years protecting you from hard truths. I won't protect you from this." I pulled out the coroner's reports and the pictures from the graves. He refused to look, eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. So I read. Both subjects found deceased on the bed, evidence of long-term intravenous use, minor child, discovered by motel staff in the bathroom. "Stop!" he shouted, standing so fast his chair tipped over. His coffee spilled, spreading across the table like an ink blot. He was breathing hard, chest heaving. He looked younger all of a sudden, small, like the boy in the orphanage yard. "I woke up," he said hoarsely. They were always tired, but that day they were too tired." I stayed seated. Let him pace. "I thought they were just sleeping," he said, voice cracking. "I went in the bathroom because there were bugs. I remember staring at a crack in the tile. I don't know how long I sat there."
When the lady came in and screamed, I thought she was mad at me. He sank back into the chair, staring at the papers. Tears balanced on the edges of his eyes, but they didn't fall. "I didn't ask to be born like that," he muttered. "I didn't ask to have this in me." "You didn't," I agreed. "But you did choose what you did to me." He looked up, eyes desperate. "I was scared you'd die and leave me with nothing. I was scared you'd grow up and never learn how to stand on your own 2 feet, I shot back. "That's why I didn't hand you a pile of money at 25, because I loved you enough to make you work for something, not because I wanted to punish you." He let out a bitter laugh. "You call this love?" "Yes," I said. "Love is not letting you become the worst version of yourself without consequence. It's not covering up what you did. It's making sure you face it." His shoulders sagged. "So what now?" he asked. "You gonna send me to prison? Have me locked up like you were?" "That's not my choice anymore," I said. "That's the DA's. It's the judge's. You could tell them to drop it. You could say you don't want to press charges." "I did press charges," I said quietly. "For the forgery, for the financial theft, for the false reports that got me locked away. I can't unring that bell. And even if I could," I swallowed, "you could have gotten me hurt in there. Killed, even. You think I'm going to protect you from the consequences of that?" His face twisted. "I said I was scared. And I'm saying you need more help than I can give you. From professionals. From the law, apparently. Because you don't listen to anything else." We sat there. The silence heavy, broken only by the ticking clock and the faint hum of the fridge. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes, because I'd waited so many years to hear those words on so many smaller things. And now that I finally heard them, my heart didn't leap with joy. It just ached. "You're sorry you got caught," I said gently. "Not yet sorry for what you did. That might come later." He flinched but didn't argue. I slid the pictures of his parents' graves back toward him. "You can go see them if you want. I wrote down the address. Might help you understand some things about yourself. But I won't be going with you." He nodded jerkily. "Do you still want me to call you Mom?" His voice was so small I almost said yes out of sheer habit. Instead, I looked him in the eye. "I want you to call your lawyer. You're going to need one." The investigation took months. The DA's office moved slower than I wanted, faster than I expected. They interviewed me, interviewed Denise, pulled security footage from the bank ATMs, subpoenaed records from the hospital. They called Maria, the nurse who quietly noted in my chart that I was oriented, coherent, and likely being underestimated. They reviewed Dr. Chang's report. They compared signatures. They tracked the trail of money Tyler had siphoned off for months. Thousands of dollars, not millions, but enough to matter. There was talk of a plea deal first, restitution, probation, some mandated therapy. Part of me wanted that. A selfish, tired part of me wanted to avoid a trial, avoid seeing my private heartbreak laid out in court like a TV movie of the week. But then the DA showed me something I hadn't known. A recording. The transport company that had picked me up had dash cameras with audio. On it, you could hear Tyler standing outside my house after they'd loaded me into the van. He laughed. Actually laughed. He said, "She'll be mad, but she'll get over it. Once I have access to her funds, I can make sure she's in a better facility, something nicer, and I can finally move out of that dump. It's a win-win." He said it like he was discussing a business merger. When I heard that, something in me hardened. I told the DA, no deal. He knew exactly what he was doing. So they charged him. Fraud, forgery, financial exploitation of an elderly person, false statements. A stack of things I had to have explained twice, but understood perfectly. Each one carried weight. Taken together, they were heavy. At the arraignment, he stood there in a cheap suit beside his public defender, because his emergency access to my accounts had been shut down the minute the bank got my documentation. He looked back at me once. The boy in the orphanage yard flashed over his face like a double exposure. Then it was gone, replaced by the man who'd calmly handed my things to the orderlies like he was sending me off to a spa weekend. He pled not guilty.
Of course he did. The trial was ugly. Lawyers asking me to recount every humiliating detail. The defense trying to paint me as greedy, vindictive, confused. They insinuated that I'd changed my story after the fact, that I'd misunderstood the papers I'd signed, that I'd willingly gone to the hospital and only cried foul after. They underestimated how organized a 60-year-old woman's rage can be. I had dates, times, names, copies, notes. I had my little daily notebook proving I'd been functioning just fine before everything went sideways. I had my clients who testified I'd been doing their books up to the day I was taken with no mistakes. I had Maria and Hannah, who'd both, under oath, described my behavior in the hospital as coherent, lucid, and far from psychotic. I had Dr. Chiang, who calmly stated that any delusions I had were in fact accurate assessments of what had been done to me. The prosecution played the dash cam audio. The jury shifted uncomfortably as Tyler's voice filled the room, casually discussing my future like it was a chess move. But the most damning thing, surprisingly, was the adoption file. The defense tried to argue that Tyler's traumatic background made him overprotective, that his actions were misguided, but essentially loving. So the prosecution introduced the records showing that, as a child, he'd learned to manipulate adults early just to survive, that he'd lied to caseworkers to stay with abusive relatives, that he'd triangulated caregivers against each other. They weren't painting him as a monster, just as someone who had been taught, over and over that the only way to get what he needed was to bend the truth until it broke. And now that bent truth had crashed into the solid wall of legal reality. I sat there on the witness stand, hands folded, watching my son's jaw clench. Part of me wanted to stand up and say, "Stop this. He's mine. He's heard enough." But then I remembered the van doors closing, the weeks of sedatives, the feeling of being erased in official paperwork. And I stayed seated. It took the jury less than a day. Guilty, on the major counts. The judge considered his lack of prior adult convictions, his rough childhood, his potential for rehabilitation, and still sentenced him to a few years in state prison, plus restitution and mandatory therapy. Not life, not decades, but not a slap on the wrist either. When the sentence was read, Tyler finally cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just silent tears running down his face as he stared straight ahead. I wanted to go to him, touch his shoulder, tell him I still loved him. Instead, I sat very still and allowed the consequences to land. Because if I swooped in to save him from those two, what would I be teaching him? That he could destroy people and still have a soft landing as long as he said sorry with enough tears? No. Love isn't immunity. It's accountability. People ask when they hear the cleaned up version of this story, do you regret adopting him? No. I regret what he did. I regret what the system let him get away with for as long as it did. I regret that an orphanage teacher talked about kids like merchandise in front of a woman who knew damn well they were human beings with entire universes of hurt inside them. But I don't regret taking him home that day. Because for 19 years, he had stability he wouldn't have had otherwise. He had Christmases with gifts wrapped in real paper instead of plastic bags. He had someone in the stands at his games. He had a bed that always smelled like laundry detergent, not cigarettes and mildew. And I had him. I had the way his face lit up the first time he caught a fly ball, the way he fell asleep on my shoulder on long car rides, the way he hugged Mark on his last Father's Day like he never wanted to let go. Those things were real too. Now he writes me from prison. The first letter was defensive, all excuses and half apologies. I just panicked. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't write back. The second letter was shorter. No justifications, just, I read some of my file. I didn't know about the motel, about the bugs. I've been having dreams. I remember more now. I'm sorry I used you the way they used each other. I still didn't write back. The third letter came 6 months in. His handwriting was different, smaller, neater. He wrote, I visited their graves. They did a prison transport to the county for another case, and my counselor arranged it. I stood there and thought about how I tried to bury you alive while you were still breathing.
I don't know how to live with that yet. I'm going to therapy. I'm trying. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I'm not pretending this didn't happen anymore. I wrote back to that one. I didn't call him son. I didn't sign love, mom. I wrote, Tyler, I'm glad you're going to therapy. I'm glad you're not running from the truth anymore. I won't lie. I am still angry. I am still hurt. But I do not want you to die the way they did. Inside first, then out. You are capable of better than what you did to me. Prove it. Not for me. For yourself. Linda. It wasn't a Hallmark card. It was a boundary with a crack in it, big enough for hope to squeeze through if it wanted to. Legally, my life is safer now. My will has been redone with more oversight. The trust is tighter. Denise is my medical power of attorney. I have locks on things I never thought I'd need locks on. Emotionally, it's messier. I still wake up some nights hearing the van door slam. I still find myself counting my pills out loud just to prove I remember. I still watch any transport vans that drive down my street a little too closely. But I also water my plants. I play cards with my neighbors. I keep a file folder labeled Good Things, where I stick notes from clients,
pictures from my niece's kids, printouts of silly cat memes that make me laugh. Life doesn't stop because someone betrays you. It just gets rerouted. If you're waiting for a neat ending where my son gets out of prison a changed man and we have a tearful reunion on my front porch, I can't give you that. He's still inside as I tell this. He might come out a better person. He might not. That's his work now. What I can tell you is this. Being a mother, adoptive or biological, does not mean being a doormat. Love does not mean sacrificing your sanity, your rights, your safety, or your entire life savings so someone else can avoid the consequences of their choices. And being 60 doesn't mean you're powerless. I was supposed to be the confused old woman, quietly shuffled into the background while the younger generation divvied up my life. Instead, I read the paperwork. I learned the rules. I used the same systems they used against me. My son put me in a mental hospital. I got out. And with a stack of files, a stubborn streak, and the help of a few people who actually cared about the truth, I put him in jail. Do I feel victorious? Not really. What I feel is something quieter, something solid. I feel like I finally stepped out of the role everyone wanted me to play. The grateful adoptive mom, the aging burden, the confused patient, and into the only one that ever really fit. A woman who knows exactly what happened to her, refuses to pretend otherwise, and is no longer afraid to pick up the stick, scrape at the ground, and say, no, not this time. That's not revenge exactly. That's survival with teeth.
So, another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.